too many cameras, but I have to be honest.
Do you not want to be on camera? Look, if you don't want to be on camera, I don't. I respect this man, and I don't want him to be on camera. So don't put this.
That's fine.
You don't want your face being shown.
Yeah, even.
We'll leave it today. We'll leave it. No cameras.
But I want to respect your right to what you want. I don't want to put you in a difficult position.
Even when you read the Quran, like when it talks about Abraham, he says, "My Lord, I have made my family reside in a place with no vegetation." So it's acknowledged even within the Quran that Mecca is a place with no vegetation.
Wait, but in context of where? Abraham.
Abraham, yeah.
But again, I'm going to challenge the notion that Abraham had anything to do with Mecca.
Yeah, but that's not. The debate is that Mecca has vegetation. And the thing is, we have.
Well, we know it doesn't. We know. It's a matter of history.
But you're trying to argue that the Islamic narrative says that there is vegetation.
Well, it mentions it.
From the Quran, that the Quran says that Mecca has no vegetation.
Well, no, I mean, it seems to be implying that people are familiar with it.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
I mean, it talks. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are passages that mention fish and things.
They would go to Jerusalem and bring some olives back. What would be the problem? They would go to Jerusalem anyways.
Why would they? No, they wouldn't. Well, why would they? Do you know how far that is? You're talking about many months of travel to do that, to do a round trip, to go there and back. It's many months of your life with camels that you're going to need a lot of resources to do. And this is why traditionally an understanding and a narrative of trade fixes that. Because if you don't have that narrative of trade, then Mecca seems very isolated.
Yeah, but people still lived in Arabia anyways. Like, if Arabia is a desert, and people lived there anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Mecca wasn't one of the ideal places. Mecca, it's like...
It's not an ideal place, we agree.
No, it's very isolated. You know, there's the mountain cliffs right next to it, right?
Yeah.
You saw in my video the mountain cliffs to the side.
Yeah.
It's like it's about 1.6 thousand meters drop.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you say it's not, that makes it unlikely to be a pilgrimage site, but...
Well, I meant in the context of trade in that example, because Yathrib or Mecca, Medina is on the mountain.
No, you said in the context of pilgrimage, because this is Mecca, and then you said the rest of Arabia is here. This is, and there's a high point of it, so that makes it unlikely, inconvenient for people to come from here up until Mecca and then go back, right? So that was a problem with having Mecca as a trade center, because as a trade route, you said it's already from Yemen, so there wouldn't be too many mountains.
Yeah, like if you wanted to do a trade route from Yemen, you just stick on the right-hand side of the mountain.
Yeah,
you would never go down. Because to take camels with you, going 1,000 meters down and up again, is a really big ask.
Yeah, I still see no evidence that there was a trade route between Yemen and Jerusalem.
Well, I agree with that. I don't think there was.
There is.
But see, the issue, of course, is now you need to explain why are these traditions of Muhammad being a merchant? Because Mecca didn't have the capability to do that. It was a subsistence economy.
There's no evidence that there was a trade route from Muslim sources. I'm not talking from...
Well, no, what I mean is the Muslim sources talk about him as a merchant, so he's trading things.
Right, so we agree at least that, based on at least that for Muslim sources there is no trade route from Yemen to Jerusalem.
That went through Mecca, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's fine. So now, just I want to come back to the point about pilgrimage. You said Mecca is an inconvenient place, would be an inconvenient place for pilgrimage, and it wouldn't be likely that people would travel.
Right, yeah, so can I expand a little bit on that, or what do you want to talk about?
I just had a question because
yeah, sure.
What I would say is Mecca was after Islam. We have evidence that it was a place of pilgrimage after Islam.
Oh yeah, it was, yeah.
So yeah, it was. So people pilgrimage to Mecca, that's not a problem.
Well, do you know how that was done though? So Queen Zubaydah, who I think comes from what is Monday, Iraq. So around Kufa Basra, I think. It's somewhere north, right? She actually builds infrastructure to give water to Mecca because the pilgrims need it. This is some point in the 700s. So to me that makes sense. Why? Because Islam has developed and now it's a major pilgrim site. Oh, thank you, brother. They need a lot of this, right? And they don't have JC coming in with bringing it in. So they had to put in systems in place, aqueducts, to actually give that kind of water to the pilgrims. Because again, I mean, if you look at Mecca today, the Hajj is supported by massive desalination plants all along the Red Sea. They take the salt water of the Red Sea, they convert it using electricity into fresh water, they then pump that so that people can get fresh water at Mecca. Because the Zamzam well isn't sufficient. The Zamzam well is still used, but it's on and off. Because if they were to just leave it on full, they'd just suck up all the water out of the ground. And they know that, which is why there are desalination plants. There are Muslim traditions that say that the Zamzam well is infinite. We know that's not true. Just practically.
You just said it's pumping. You just said it's still pumping.
Yeah, it's not infinite as in, you can't just rely on it as an infinite source. It will run out.
Like, because when you have a million people coming in at one point, at one place, all throughout the year, like it's gonna require a certain amount of pressure. It's not about even the quantity of the water that's in. It's about the amount of pressure that you can get out.
I'm afraid no. It is the fact that they have desalination plants. I've actually read the engineer blueprints for it. I went really deep into it, and you know what? It's foreigners who built it. It's like people from Canada. They're like Canada companies that built. There's plants in Jeddah. You know, Jeddah is like the coastal city to the west of Mecca. Many people, if they want to do pilgrimage, Hajj, they arrive in Jeddah and then they travel to Mecca. And Jeddah is a major supporter of Mecca in terms of Hajj, because it needs it, because there are so many people there and it demands so much water. The Zamzam well is insufficient. They still use it. Okay, here's another thing. Do you know what they do with the Zamzam water now? It doesn't just come out of the ground and then get distributed. It used to. Now, like a few decades going back, they changed it to go through a plant that filters it. The Zamzam water is filtered. Why is it filtered? Because there are cases of Muslims getting Zamzam water, taking it with them, and then giving it to others, and it turned out the water was bad. So to make sure that
all of a sudden it turned to bad water, I find it very surprising.
But you see, to me, that just says, well, it's not miraculous. It's just water. It might be nice water, it might even be very clean water, but it is just water. Yeah, look into it.
I see Zamzam. What Zamzam is, the state of the well of Zamzam today is a bit, I don't find it very relevant, especially to what we're speaking of.
Okay, well, it was a point to say that Mecca couldn't have sustained large populations, and for a major pilgrimage site, you would need large populations.
Yeah, but it still doesn't disprove something. It doesn't disprove it very much, honestly. Because like I've already said, it's like, as a pilgrimage site, I have no problem. It's fine. It's a pilgrimage site. There's a problem there because historically, like I said, people were coming to Mecca from all different places, from Arabia, from outside of Arabia. People were going to.
Well, Mecca is an isolated community. It's not international. There aren't people just coming there for a holiday or something, or for a pilgrimage site. They're not doing that. It is a community of Arabs that are living in that place, and it's a subsistence economy. They don't make anything to then go on and sell or trade because they can't afford to. The environment doesn't suit that. It's an arid environment. The fertility rate is very low. You know, you got to do what you got to do. It's to be honest with you, just looking. If you just get a satellite view of Mecca and just look at it and look at the ground, ask yourself, does it look fertile or not? And the answer you're going to get, and then look at where's the nearest river, because normally when you set up villages, towns, cities, they're normally close to rivers, freshwater rivers, right? That would have been particularly important in a very hot climate. But Mecca isn't that. You could find an oasis. Is there an oasis near Mecca? No. Where's the nearest oasis? Yathrib, Medina. Medina has an oasis.
That's good evidence.
That makes sense. That's you could potentially do more with that. Maybe the population was larger. Maybe they could have done something there. But in Mecca, you couldn't have.
Because there's evidence. Do you know what's it called? Khaybar.
Khaybar, yeah, the place of the Jews.
Yeah,
further north. Taif is to the east. Khaybar's to the north.
They had the strongholds on the sea.
Right.
Is that what you call it?
Sure. Yeah.
Like around the sea.
Yeah, walls of the sea.
The walls, yeah. And archaeologically, you still have those walls to this day.
Okay.
Right? You see them.
Sure.
So that's evidence, at least, about what we say. It's archaeological evidence that when we talk about Taif and we talk about Khaybar and the walls and everything.
Well, remember, my claim isn't that somehow every single claim that's ever been made is wrong. Rather, it's the central claims I find problematic, right? So the idea of Mecca as a major center of pilgrimage, I find problematic. Mecca as any place of significance, I find problematic. Now, I might say something like maybe Muhammad was born there and then moved. That, I think, might make sense. I'm not sure exactly why he moved, but maybe he did. But again, the idea of everything taking place in Mecca is difficult. It's very difficult from a historical point of view.
Percentage-wise, what do you think?
I mean, for me, I think it's not at all probable. It's not. Okay, I'd say it's. Okay, let me explain the situation. You have to get a well-established Jewish, Christian, and largely Syriac narrative. It includes things like Dul Qarnayn, it includes the Cave of the Seven Sleepers, just Surah 18 alone. It's full of these things. You need to get knowledge of all of that in a place that is basically isolated and isn't engaging with the wider Christian or Jewish community. You also need to have a substantial enough population that it can be a major pilgrimage site. It needs to support a significant amount of pilgrims that have been coming since at least the time of Abraham, if not the time of Adam.
I think it wasn't obviously a place of pilgrimage at the time of Abraham. It became a place of pilgrimage where
At some point,
theologically.
well, okay, but it would have been at some point. Because the Quran, I think, makes it clear that this has been a place of pilgrimage for a long period before Muhammad.
Not a long period, maybe a couple of centuries.
I think it's implied long. I think it's not long after Abraham, really.
No.
I mean,
Abraham
obviously,
Abraham
yeah.
the Kaaba, but for it to become a place of pilgrimage, actual pilgrimage, that's happened way later. But I want to go back to something else as well.
Yeah, sure. No worries.
It's like you said, the inscriptions, the rock inscriptions, a couple of centuries before the 7th century.
Oh yeah.
Were monotheistic. So can you explain?
Oh yeah, Dr. Ahmad Al-Jalad. Well,
what sense are they monotheistic?
they mention Allah. So it's like they're, or
What does that mean, they mention Allah?
what I mean is they don't mention pre-Islamic pagan gods.
Yeah, but you have to look at the Quran as a historical document as well. Because
Oh, absolutely, I believe so. That's what I'm trying to do.
because the Quran mentions a lot of idols. So it mentions
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you can find those names in the 3rd century. You can find them in the Hijaz in the 3rd century. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, but then they die out. So for hundreds of years, we do have inscriptions of that period, of that place. They're able to mention Allah. So it seems as if whatever context Muhammad came to, it was a largely monotheistic context.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't make sense for the Quran to condemn polytheism and polytheism wasn't a thing.
Well, now here's how. Now this is an interesting thing. I think there are certain parts of the Quran that, using the traditional standard Islamic narrative, it doesn't make sense. So I'll look at Surah Al-Ma'idah 82. And it's, it's basically, it says, paraphrasing. Sorry, bro, sorry.
It makes sense to me. Why Muhammad stopped following Jesus? And thought that, Jesus was going wrong and you have to make something better.
Well, let's go.
But anyway,
No, it's not, no worries.
I don't know if you know Ian. I'm his cousin and he said you're very knowledgeable. He wants to know from.
Oh, thank you. What's your name? Jeff. Nice to meet you, Jeff. God bless. It says, you will find that those with the greatest enmity towards you are the Jews. And this is the interesting word, and I think the word is mushrikun. Basically the polytheists.
Hold on, 582.
Yeah. Because this verse has always been a verse that, to me, I've always struggled with. Because it doesn't seem to add up to me.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't add up to what you're saying.
Well, no, I'm looking at it through Islamic eyes. I'm trying to think of, I know what the Quran claims to do in these places, so this must work with this. But it doesn't. So let's read it and let's see what happens.
As it says, you will surely find the most intense of the people and animosity towards the believers are the Jews and those who associate the Mushrikun.
Okay. Yeah.
You will find the nearest of them in affection to the believers, those who say we are Christians. That is because we are Christians amongst them because they're not arrogant.
So the thing that finds that bizarre to me is the associators, the Mushrikun, aren't those Christians at that period? Wouldn't that be Trinitarian Christians?
No, this one is talking about, he's referring not to the Christians because obviously he's saying those that...
But it says associators. The Quran makes it clear, and it uses that term to describe us.
When it talks about Mushrikun, usually it's talking about the pagans. It doesn't use that word for the Jews and Christians.
Yeah, but my point is it uses the term associators, I think in other verses, about Christians who believe that God is three. Really? I find that very bizarre then. I find that very bizarre.
It uses the word kufr as in disbelief for the Jews and Christians, but it doesn't use the word Muslim. Because even despite the fact that they do commit shirk theologically, the Quran makes it...
Right, and how do you commit shirk though? You associate.
Say again?
How do you commit shirk? Is it not through association?
Yeah, but the Quran makes a distinction still between the Jews and Christians and the pagans, because the pagans, obviously, as you can imagine, they are...
Sure.
So they are called mushrikun primarily.
Right. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Sorry to jump in. In that second part of the verse, when it talks about the Christians, the word that used there in Arabic is Nazara, I think it is.
Always used Nasara, doesn't it?
That's technically not the word for Christians. The word for Christians is more like Masih or something.
Huh?
The word for Christian in Arabic is something more like Masih or something.
That's modern Christian. That's modern Arabic.
Okay. Well, the reason I point this out is because the word Nazara just basically means literally a Nazarene.
Yeah.
Well, you see, what's interesting is in historical terms, we have accounts of people who are called Nazarenes, who are Judo-Christianizers, basically. And our church fathers write about them. And this thing covers people like the Ebionites. It covers people that are alternative groups that are not part of the church. So I'm wondering if a better way of looking at this is actually the Quran is saying those that you will find greatest enmity is the Jews, because I think the Quran does actually condemn rabbinic Jews quite strongly, and the associators, i.e. Trinitarian Christians, but you will find those that you find easiest to get on with are those who call themselves Nazarenes, because there's a particular group called the Nazarenes.
No, but the reason that would make sense is because the Quran always calls Christians Nazarenes.
The problem I have with that, though, is that it seems quite clearly, though, that anyone that says that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, by the Quran's own understanding, you look at Surah 4, Ayah 171, is an associator.
Surah 4 there is no verse that says that the Christians are associated.
No, I'm pretty sure if we go through this, we can find things that say anyone that says, like, Jesus is the Son, why is that condemned? It's because it's associating the Son with the Father. Right, so associating.
What I'm explaining is the Quran makes a distinction, even despite the fact that that is shirk, but it makes a distinction between the pagans, because that's obviously the highest step of shirk.
Yeah.
Distinction between those, the Jews and the Christians, because they are close to the truth and the pagans.
Okay, let's take your interpretation of the verse. So those who have the highest enmity are the Jews and the polytheists, but you will find the least with the Christians. But historically that wouldn't have been the case, because if they would have encountered so many Christians from Ethiopia, from Egypt, from Syria, from Yemen, who would have been Trinitarian Christians. But the Quran condemns them very clearly as those who are associating.
Where's the contradiction there? So you're saying...
No, my point is, it's just a weird thing to think about, because...
them and then saying that they're close and what's the word? Close in affection, that's not a contradiction.
Well, it's a very weird understanding, though. You're saying, the Quran is saying, you're going to have difficulties with the Jews and the polytheists, and those that you're going to be having a much easier time getting along with are the Christians, but the Quran also tells you these Christians believe in three gods.
What's the point? The gospel does the same thing.
But no, what I mean is like...
there is no contradiction between condemning something theologically and then saying...
I'm not saying it's a contradiction. I'm saying it's just a very difficult passage to get your head around.
It makes perfect sense.
Well, I mean, there are other examples of this, right? There's a verse in the Quran that it says it's not permitted for Muslims to marry polytheists. Okay. There's also another verse in the Quran that talks about those who are saying three. This is 4171, I think. Those who say three, they should stop because you're associating with Allah, which is a form of polytheism. The Quran in Surah 5, Ayah 5, I think it is, or 4 or 5, says it's permissible for a Muslim man to marry a Christian. So how does that work? It's not permitted for you to marry to marry polytheists. Christians who say Trinity are polytheists, you can marry people of the book who are Christian.
Because of the same thing that I've just said, because the mushrikun, the people that are called mushrikun is basically referring to the pagans, because they are the highest level of shirk. Whereas the Jews and Christians get a better treatment because they are close to the truth. That's what I'm saying.
But okay, so now think of this weird scenario.
That's how it works.
What you can basically do is, the Quran is basically saying, if you meet a polytheist who's not of the book, who believes there's two gods, right? That would be worse for you than a person of the book who believes, according to the Quran, in three gods. No, but we understand, the Quran is telling you it's permissible to marry that person who the Quran believes is believing in three gods, but it's telling you it's forbidden for you to marry a pagan who believes in two gods.
That's what ayah is talking about, so you can look at yourself.
I know about that, because I know, because you see how...
I'm not saying this is necessarily a contradiction, I'm saying it's just a very weird way of doing it. The Islamic perspective, the Islamic paradigm is basically that Surah 5 just abrogates what it said before. But if it abrogated it before, what was the point of revealing that verse? The verse was only there for like a few years. What was the point of it?
What verse? Say again, I lost you.
Okay, so there's 5, I think it's Ayah 4, so Surah Al-Ma'idah Ayah 4 or 5 is the final one where it says it's permissible for Muslim men to marry people of the book, women, and then there's, I think it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, I need to find the verse, but it basically says it's not permissible for Muslims to marry polytheists. And then
I don't think that's an application.
well, I'm pretty sure the normal Islamic perspective is that Surah Al-Ma'idah Ayah 4 or 5 abrogates that verse.
I'm not sure about that.
Alright, fair enough. Well,
Because I'm trying to take, there was Muslims that were Jews and Christians even before that.
Well, yeah, but the majority of them would have been Trinitarians, and that's why historically it's very problematic.
You're trying to argue that believing in two pagan gods is better than believing in...
Well, I mean, if that situation are right, well, what I'm saying is, if you just look at it logically, the Quran says don't go with polytheists. The Quran says those who associate with Allah, like the Christians who say there are three gods, that's association. That's bad. That's multiple gods. Because actually, yeah, Surah Al-Ma'idah 116, there's that hypothetical conversation where Allah says to Jesus, did I tell you to take Allah, yourself, and Mary as three separate gods? So yes, it does accuse the Christians, the Trinitarians, of believing in three separate gods.
We're not debating that one.
That's fine.
The Muslims. It doesn't call the Muslims.
What do you mean by that, don't you?
You know, you said the Mushrikun.
Mushrikun, right.
Oh yeah, it's basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't call the Mushrikun. So it's basically it's just a very easy concept. I don't understand.
No, it's because if you just reason the verses out, it's not, you can't be with polytheists. Jesus is asked by Allah, did I tell you to take yourself, Allah, and Mary as three separate gods? And then Surah 5, Ayah 4 to 5, it's permissible for Muslim men to take females from the people of the book. So you now have a weird situation where it's not allowed for a Muslim to take a female who is a pagan that believes in two gods, but it's permissible for them to take a person of the book who's a Trinity believer who supposedly believes in three gods.
The irony is now you're making a weird scenario where you're trying...
Well, I mean, it just shows you that something's gone wrong here, somewhere, I think.
The irony is that you're trying to make actually a weirder case by trying to argue that believing in two pagan gods is better.
Well, it's not me that's doing it. I just read the Quran verses and I'm like, hang on, am I getting this right? Is it saying this and then saying this and saying this? And the way the Muslims acknowledge it just say this, they just take a different interpretation about what's going on. And I say, whatever's going on, it's weird.
I don't see that. Because if that would be the case, if, for example, the Jews and Christians are all in that sense.
Well, yeah, Jesus is asked, did I tell you to take three separate gods? Yeah, but see, that's a different...
You can't find that verse.
It seems... Wait.
That's what.
It seems to me that the term associator is very clearly applied to Trinitarian Christians in the Quran.
Well, you're going to have to give an example, because I'm telling you right now, you're not going to find it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to show you 5116, but I don't think it has the words associator in that particular verse.
I'm telling you right now, there is no verse that calls Christians and Jews associated. So that basically makes it very clear, because there is no inconsistency.
Let's do some homework. Let's both go back home and look to see if the word that means associator is ever applied to Christians.
I've done that myself.
Okay, well, I'm still half and half about it. But I'll go home and I'll check.
I know it sounds a bit weird because you've got a certain idea of it, but...
Well, even from the Quran's perspective, it kind of makes sense, right? Because Trinitarians are associating according to the Quran.
Yeah, they are associated.
Yeah, so it would make sense they're called associators.
But they're not.
But they're not. So, okay, we'll go and check. All right, anyway.
It's a special category.
Anyway, that's something I found interesting lately. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to bring back to?
I'm trying to remember. Talk about the inscriptions. That was a good point. So, hold on. The inscriptions that were in the 2nd century, were they written in Arabic?
A proto form of Arabic, yeah. Because Arabic, the Arabic the Quran is written in is Northern Arabic, and it comes from a Nabatean form of Aramaic. So it takes that and then evolves from that into Arabic that we have today. And this, of course, wasn't fully finalized until a little bit after Muhammad. And this is why Uthman didn't write his codices with the vowels and the, so on.
That would make sense, because even the Torah, the vowels were added
Many times later, yeah.
About 1,000 years, no, more than 1,000. Like about 1,700 years after Moses, but that doesn't mean that Hebrew is a new language just because the Qur'an was later. So even similar with Arabic, you can apply the same thing. You can say
do you believe Arabic existed long before Muhammad? Well, I know that you probably do for other reasons, but do you think it was...
I don't know how long it existed before, but all I'm saying is you're saying Uthman did not apply the critical mark to his time.
Well, that's evident, right?
That means that Arabic is a new language. But I'm saying that's not an evidence, because if you apply the same thing to Hebrew, that's going to mean that Hebrew was something that's invented.
No, okay, maybe the issue is with the term new language. It isn't a fully developed language. In the same way that Hebrew was still undergoing development of vowels for a long period.
Vowels do not mean that because vowels, because first of all, grammar rules and writing comes after the language is invented, right?
Yeah.
So that's not
The Qira'at, wait, but what I'm trying to get is, with the Qira'at, where there are ayat of differences, it's usually two possible things it could be. It could actually be a lot of other things, but they don't pick those because it wouldn't make sense at all, or it'd be blasphemous, or it would contradict. So they know it can only be this or this. But there's difference, and this is why there's so much uniformity, because everywhere knows in Arabic it can only be this or this in the context, which is why there's uniformity. But it's not complete uniformity, because again, it can be two things. So some imams from some places went with this reading, some imams went with this reading.
No, but with a lot of them, it's not as simple as
Can I ask?
it could only be two things. It can be way a lot.
I've never seen more than 4 on a single ayah. If you show me more than 4.
I have to see for myself, but as far as I know, it couldn't be, it can be way more. And the fact that...
Not reasonably though, not like, I mean you could...
And still have it make sense. I'm not talking you can have it a different way and have it completely make sense, because then that's besides the point. I'm saying it could be more ways that can actually make sense, but we don't find it to be those.
Well, I trust the Islamic scholars when they say, you know, it can be read in these different ways and there's disagreement about it. I just accept what they say. You look into it, like, you know, I spoke with Fadel Suleiman and he seemed to imply most of the time it's only like 2 per ayah. Sometimes you might see 3, sometimes 4, but that's kind of about it. 4 possibilities. So for the same ayah, it could be read according to 4 different readings.
Okay, but you just said
yeah, mostly it's 2 per ayah. Mostly, yeah. Like this is why Christians and non-Muslims will say, in the Walsh it says this, in the Hafs it says this, and that's because there's only those 2. Because technically the Hafs, Dawley agrees with Hafs, for example, so does X, Y, and Z, and then maybe Walsh is the outlier, or maybe it's Walsh and some other one that have the other reading.
For example, I'm just trying to think of something. Like, for example, the Surah 2, Surah 1, the owner of
Ayah 4, yeah.
You can actually even read it in a way that says he owned the Day of Judgment, as in the past. So, for example, instead of Maliki or Malik, you can say Malika, and it would mean that he owned in the past and in the present, like in the present continuous, the Day of Judgment, but we don't find that. That's just, it's an example I think I just thought of from the top.
Well, the past tense is difficult because, yeah, technically in the Quran, a lot of things that are translated in the present or thought of in the present are actually technically in the Arabic they're posed in the past. But that doesn't mean that Muslims think they're in the past. They just accept that as a style of writing.
Yeah, it's a style.
Yeah, Fadel Suleiman talks about this. One of the things he did with his translation is he was saying, I want Muslims to be aware that actually in the translations you read, it often presents it in like present English, when technically the Arabic is saying it's past tense. And so he wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, it's a way of...
But he doesn't think that means theological difference. He just thinks that's a form of like beauty in the Quran. That's how he would say it. Yeah. Well, if you want to look at it that way, fine. You know.
It's not very hard to understand. I understood this as a child.
The writings of Muslims who are in different places, writing how they have the Quran with them, and they are aware that in a particular verse, they are aware that their brothers in Mecca, the brothers in Medina or Damascus, they recite it slightly differently. The early Muslims weren't like afraid of this. They embraced the fact that they knew there were variants.
Yeah, of course, yeah. We know this.
Which is good. Like, it's good that they didn't hide that. They were honest about it and said, we are aware of these things. You see, how I would do that as a Muslim is I would abandon the idea of a perfectly preserved textual Quran. I would say that's not possible.
Well, that's because the thing is, we've always had in the parallel the 2 narratives of preservation and also the Qur'an. Because even me, I'll be honest, I wasn't brought up to the West, but when I came to the West, I was surprised to see that the Qur'an was as mainstream as it was in Tunisia. For example, I'm from, everybody knows about the Qur'an. Even when you see the story of how Atul found out about the Qur'an, what I take from that story is very different from what everybody takes from the story.
Wait, when you say the story of how they found out about the Qur'an, what do you mean by that?
So she went to a Moroccan shop and she asked for a Quran.
Oh, Hatun, oh, sorry. Yeah. I thought you were talking about an Islamic hadith. Sorry. Yeah.
She was asked which Quran.
Yeah.
She was surprised. But my point is, what I see from that is the fact that he asked her that demonstrates that he asks that to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's common knowledge to everyone there.
Yeah. I'm not saying that like there are parts of the world where this is known, no problem. But in the Western world, it's not known.
That's
trust me, I can tell you. I have spoken to so many Muslims that just aren't aware of it. And what's worse, to me anyway, is when they are told it by Muslims, the Muslims often lie to them about what it is. They tell them it's just dialects.
Yep.
I'm like, come on, let's.
A lot of it is dialect.
Well, a lot of it you may say is differences between past and present tense. You may say a lot of it is like you and they and stuff like that. That's fair. But to say right, but there,
I've seen that myself.
but a lot of it is also actual changes in words.
Most of them are dialects, I agree. There is some of them that are.
Right, but it's not fair to say like they're just dialect because it's basically trying to imply there's no real difference. But in reality, there is a difference. If there was no difference, Muslim scholars wouldn't have cared. They wouldn't have documented it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It would have been like, why? It's the same thing.
Yeah, I think because even when you read like the early works, a lot of it is explained as dialectal differences, and they still acknowledge that there are.
No, they do acknowledge it. I mean, remember, even the Hadith acknowledge it. This is what I thought you were perhaps alluring to. You know, Surah Al-Furqan and Hisham and Umar Al-Khattab, they argued about the recitation of chapter 25 of the Quran. The only way I think that could have happened is if there were actual differences at some point in the recitation, because otherwise it makes no sense, does it? Yeah. And you could say, well, that's the Aruf. And that's usually, I mean, the Hadith actually says at the end of it, Muhammad explains, this is the 7 different modes. These are the 7 ways the Quran is revealed to me through Jibreel.
Yeah, because here's the thing as well, right? Because the Arabs at the time, there was a lot in the dialect, in the, what's it called? In the different dialects, the dialectic differences, among them was different grammar. So some of them would use slightly different grammar than the others. So someone can look at that and say, oh, there was a difference that affected the meaning or whatever. It was a different word, and you could dismiss it as a dialectical difference, but really it is actually a dialectical difference because people use different.
Are you still talking about the same story though? Are you still talking about Hisham and Umar al-Khattab, the second caliph, when they argued about the recitation?
I'm more thinking about the story of Ubay. Do you know the story?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
There's another story where Ubay bin Ka'b takes 2 more men to the Prophet.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, what I want to say is, you know that Umar bin al-Khattab and Hisham bin Hakim, I think his name is, they're both from the same tribe of Quraysh. So they wouldn't have spoken different terms. They would have spoken. They're both from the same tribe of Quraysh. Umar and Hisham bin Hakim, I think his name is. He's the other guy. That's in the hadith where I can't remember who it is.
Hisham bin Hakim, you said?
Yeah. Check it out. They're from different clans. One is Banu. I can't remember the clans. I don't know if it's Banu Hisham or if it's a different one.
He was born in Kufa, Iraq, died in 800 AD.
Wait, what?
This is not the guy you're talking about.
No. Who's this guy?
Hisham bin Hakim, exactly.
No, it's Hikim. I don't know if it's Al-Hikim or Hisham.
Because that's not Hisham bin Hakim. He's from Quraysh, yeah. He's a companion, the son of a companion.
Yeah, so it's him and
he
it's...
embraced Islam in the conquest of Mecca, isn't he?
I think so.
So that story is pretty late then.
Well, it's a sound Sahih Hadith, but I mean, this is one of the ways that you actually infer the Aruf, because this narration goes on to talk about the Aruf.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, like, I don't know, have you looked into the Aruf? Because from my point of view, it's impossible to derive either the 10 qira'at or the presence of more than one Aruf today. I don't think we can, from an evidence point of view.
From what? To establish that
Well, let's start with the 10 qira'at. Can you show me anything from the Quran or the Sunnah where the 10 qira'at are endorsed by Muhammad?
You just call the hadith. You just cite the hadith of Umar.
Right, that's the Aruf, right? But I'm talking about the qira'at now, just in this context. There is now 10 canonized qira'at, yeah? And then you have the 2 transmitters for each one and so on, but...
Oh, yeah. So you have in the hadith of Ubay, right?
Yeah.
He says one man came to pray and he prayed with one qira'ah. Right? He used the word qira'ah. And then
does he?
Yeah.
In the hadith?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
No, I'm telling you right now. And another man came and he prayed with another qira'ah. And then so I took them both and brought to the Prophet and had the conversation and everything.
Okay.
And then he was told that I was given 7 apples. So that to me tells me that the qira'at are part of the apple.
Okay, first of all though, can you show me what the Aruf actually are?
Based on that, I would say they are the Quran. They are the same thing.
But then there's 10 qira'ats. So how do we go from 7 haruf to 10 qira'at? Is it divided into parts? And like
No, that's easy because if you have two harf, for example,
Yeah.
and then for one verse you take one harf, and then for another verse you take the second harf, then all of a sudden you can produce about four qira'at based on two harf.
But how do you know that A, 10 is the correct number that you were meant to get to, and B, how do you even validate that they are haruf in the qira'at?
There is more than 10. There's
Well,
about 30.
when you include the transmitters and so on, sure. I'm just talking about the
I'm
actual.
talking about actual qira'at that were in the time of Uthman, there was about 30. And then it was
Yeah, that is true. There was. I mean, that to me raises another problem. In the early period, there was a lot of different forms of recitation of the Quran that are not accepted today.
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? So in the time of Abu Bakr, this wasn't a problem. In the time of Umar, this wasn't a problem. This started to become a problem in the time of Uthman. So Abu Bakr does his codex based on one problem. The problem is because the people who recite the Quran have been dead.
And well, thank God that he comes to me and he asks me these questions because it gives me a chance to talk to him. So I have a lot of patience for that man. But anyway, God bless you all. Take care.